This morning I am interviewing Tyana Golsteijn, and she has very generously offered to stay past your work hours because Tiana's in the Netherlands, I'm in West Coast, North America, so well, we're making it work. And the reason I'm interviewing Tyana today is because Tyana is a specialist in podcasting. Her business, Blackbird Podcast, is all about training and coaching people to create podcasts for their business. So before I go any deeper with that, I'm going to get you into this conversation, Tyana. And so what is your core offering in your business? It's podcasting, but what do you do with your clients?
Well, I do several things. I have launch packages, for example, in which I basically help them launch their entire podcast, but I also help them create their entire podcast from start to finish. So if it's someone who doesn't really know what to talk about, or they have a subject, but it's really very, very narrow, and they're like, well, you know, I kind of want to do more with this. I'm not really sure where to go. I really help them with that as well. So I help them create the entire concept of it. And then I basically, they get this entire plan in which I give them all the steps that they need to, you know, build the podcast. So have the intro, outro, music, all that kind of stuff. And then in the end, once they make all the content, they can send it to me and I can give them feedback on it. But also once it's finished, I can, you know, put it all online. So I can handle all the technical stuff. Because, you know, sometimes it's just a lot for them to do and they don't really want to do it. They don't have time for it. So they basically drop all the audio with me and I handle all of that. So I edit the content for them as well. And I also help them make the images for the podcast. I help find the music for it. And then I also put it online. So kind of all the technical stuff that they don't want to think about that has nothing to do with the content is on me.
That's really interesting, because when I first started chatting with you and I heard about your business, I was thinking, okay, so she's going to help them with all the tech, but that's really interesting that you also coach them through content and planning out their series. That's
definitely
huge.
Because you know, sometimes people don't need it. So there's also people that are just like, you know, I just need someone to edit my podcast and put it online. So I also have, you know, I have subscriptions for that so that people can do that too. But there's also people that really want to get started and they don't know how. You know, they don't know how to get started. They don't really know what to do, how it works. So then I kind of help them, steer them in the right direction and help them in that process as well. So I definitely like to do both, just, you know, because there's a lot of people that have difficulty with making podcasts and they don't really, sometimes they don't really know how to really work it to their advantage, how to really use it for their business. So then I also help them with that aspect. So just to make sure that it all goes right from the start.
Okay. Oh, geez. Now I have a million questions, and you're taking me way out of order because I want to ask you just about exactly what you said. But before I get ahead of myself, so what were you doing before you got into podcasting or teaching people how to podcast?
I was mainly doing video editing for people in the beginning as a virtual assistant, just, you know, so that people could send their all their video to me and I could, you know, make a video for their business out of that. That's what I started with. Sorry, that was a door. And, you know, I really did enjoy doing that because I'm a very visual person, but also an auditive person. So my sister was the one who actually told me, well, you know, podcasts are right now really coming up in our country as well. Why not do those as well? Because they are very similar. And because I do, you know, when you're video editing, you also focus on the audio. You want to get that right as well. And of course, with podcasts, that's even more focused on that. So I kind of created a whole company around that. And then I kind of dropped the video editing because it was just not really the thing that was fun for me at that time, because it was all business videos and it was just, you know, it was less my thing. So I focused on the podcasts and that's what I've been doing now.
So you went from doing the business videos to this. I would imagine there's a whole lot more potential for creativity in what it is you're doing right now.
Oh yeah, a lot more, definitely a lot more. I mean, I'm working right now with a lot of business coaches, for example. So it's still a lot of business, but I can definitely help them steer more in a creative, more creative content. And, you know, right now, because it's so up and coming still in my country, there's not a lot of, for example, audio dramas and everything, you know, that's not really big here. So that's definitely still on my wish list to do something with that as well, because I'm definitely a very creative person and I love storytelling. So I'm still really looking into that as well. Like, okay, how does that work? And what can I do with that? So there's a lot more coming probably.
So of course I immediately go to, could you then also at one point get into helping people create audiobooks? But let's not get ahead of myself.
Well, never say never.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, that's how I start my mornings when I'm not getting on a podcast early in the morning. No, it's not early.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, go to the gym and listen to an audiobook, usually something related to business, and I get all jazzed. And yeah, it's a great way to start the day. I love audiobooks and podcasts.
Yeah.
So podcasts, you were saying you work with a lot of business coaches around this. Now, for whom and or what kind of business is a podcast really appropriate? And where does it have the best return on investment? Can you make a call on that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think definitely it's for business coaches is definitely a big thing. That's for sure. But
Why
I
is
think
that?
because you can get even closer, get even more up and personal with your customers, and you can share even more. Because there's a lot of people that, for example, they have issues with video, or their customer might not want to watch long videos. So, but in a podcast, a lot of people enjoy longer shows. Once they have time, of course.
Yeah.
So, when you do a video and maybe, after 2 minutes, people are like, nah, okay, I've had enough of this. But in a podcast, you can talk for like half an hour. And if somebody's on their way to work, for 2.5 hours or something like that, or they're even, doing the dishes or something like that, they can still listen to a podcast. They don't have to put everything else down. They can still continue to do something else.
Oh, it's really interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really how a podcast, how it works even more than video does. I mean, I would always say do both. Don't just say like, okay, so now I'll switch to podcasting, do both. But it's definitely a way to reach even more people. So if that's something that, if you have a lot of knowledge on certain subjects and you really want to share more of that, you don't know how, a podcast is a really good way to do that.
Now it occurs to me, we both edit video, we both edit sound. Yeah. A whole lot less time to create a sound product than a video product. So that makes it a little bit more attractive also for creating lots of content.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've always told people that, there are some people that tell me, okay, I want to really do the podcast because I'm not really, enjoying making video because there's a lot of preparation time needed. That's true. Yep. Because you have to get the right background and, your hair, the makeup and all that crap, it all has to be perfect. But a podcast, I mean, literally, I could sit here in my pajamas and still record and no one will notice. Nobody will care. You can do it at all hours of the night. It does not matter. You can do it however you want. As long as the sound is good, people can understand you. It's fine. It's perfect. I mean, some people record in their car. I mean,
really?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I'm not a fan of it because the sound quality isn't always that great, but they do it. It is possible to do it. So why not? You can be on the road and be like, oh man, I have this idea and I have to share this now. You grab your phone, you record, that's it. You have a podcast.
That's incredible. So just curious about this process here. So for the people, your clients that actually do that in the car, they then take that sound file and send it off to you and you clean it up and turn it into.
Yes, exactly.
Put all their intros and their outros and all that in it and boom, they've got a professional sounding podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So again, curious about the process. For your clients that are doing this and for what you see working successfully for people who are using podcasts, how often are they actually putting out a new podcast?
It really depends. I mean, it really depends on how much time that they have. And it really depends on their clients as well. I mean, most people start with twice a month. So every other week. And, for some people who are really interested in it and they're really like, you know what, no, I just want to go for it right away. They do it once a week. I know there's also people out there who actually do it more than once a week, which is a lot. But, if you have the time for it and you have that much content to share, why not?
So
but,
I assume
it really depends.
They're just building their library. They've got the time. Let's get that content library built out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always good to start with more podcasts anyway, once you launch it. But, after that, it really depends on how much time you have and how much time you want to spend on it. So, if you even say like, you know what, I don't really want to have a consistency in there. I just want to do it whenever I feel like it. Go for it. I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. And, people will listen whenever they can anyway. It's just some people really do look forward to a new episode. So then it's, it's nice to have a new one consistently. But if you don't, it's not like people are going to say like, oh man, it's been taking 6 months and now I'm going to stop listening. No, if there's a new episode and they're interested, they will continue to listen.
Yeah.
That's how it
So
works.
it's down to the quality of the content and the value you bring to it. Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, I'm going to shift gears here and get into the technical side of things, the tools. What tools do you use in your work around this?
Well, for the editing, I use Adobe Audition,
Mm-hmm.
and I also use Isotope, which is, sort of a program that you can take a lot of the all of the background noises and stuff out of it that way a lot easier than with Adobe. So write that down. Exactly. It's very nice to use. I really love it, especially, if there's someone who's talking and they breathe a lot into the microphone, or, they don't use a pop filter. So it's very, you hear all the explosive sounds.
Yeah.
That program really can take them out very easily, and you don't have to do much in it then, I mean, still you have to edit it yourself, of course, a lot, but that tool, they have a lot more possibilities that Adobe doesn't offer. So, first you load it into that program, you take all the crap out, then you load it back into Adobe, and then you do the rest. And then after that, I master it with Auphonic, which is Auphonic. Yeah. Okay. That's another app that it's not even really an app. It's just an online website where you can upload your audio, and it kind of, it puts it at the right audio levels that is needed for podcasting. Yeah. So it really just, pulls all the audio together on one line and says, okay, it has to be, -16 in audio level. So it puts everything on that level, and it can take some extra background noises out and stuff like that. So it really just completes the whole thing, and then you can put it online. Now,
not wanting to get too nerdy about this, but I use Audacity, and it's got some noise removal stuff, but I find when you go for too many different kinds of noise that you're taking out, you're pulled out so many pitch ranges that it ends up sounding kind of hollow and or abnormal. Now when you run it through Isotope and then Auphonic, you don't get that problem?
No, because I really do pay attention to that. Like because in Isotope, especially, Auphonic not so much, but Isotope, you can have a preview. So you can, grab a filter, you can have an effect, try some things out, move a few bars, just try some stuff out. Then you click on the preview and it'll play it. You can hear the difference. Yeah. And, if it sounds funky, then I'm just going to delete that filter and just try something else. Yeah. So, because you do want to make sure that it's, not actually sounding worse than it was when you got it. You don't want it to sound like a robot or something. So
yes.
I do watch out for that for sure.
So is Isotopic?
Isotope.
Yeah. Isotope. Is that a free or a subscription piece of software?
It's not free. They definitely do have, they have several different versions. Mm-hmm. So you have like a standard version, which I'm not even sure what the prices are, but that one's kind of the basic one. Mm-hmm. Then you have the advanced one, and that one is already, it already has a lot more filters and possibilities in there. And then I think you also have, or is it extended and then the advanced? I'm not sure. There's 3 different versions, and then you also have one that's even bigger than that, and you can even use that in, for example, movies and stuff where you have to isolate the voice from the music score, for example. Right. So then you can even do that. But for me, I don't need that right now. So I'm like, no, I'm gonna focus on that one. So I have the advanced one, so I can actually use all the different filters and that are really needed for a podcast.
Yeah. Okay, now, of course, we're geeking out on this one. Both into sound editing. And I know I'm going to have to stop myself today from going out and checking out Isotope. But, excuse me. So for your average person, when you're teaching people how to do this, of course, you're going to, if they're coming to you and you're coaching them, and for those clients who want to become self-sufficient in doing this, what tools do you recommend for them? Do you also recommend they use the same range of tools you do?
No, definitely not, because they're very professional, and you have to know what you're doing when you use them. And I don't want to complicate things for them. Yes. Because there are a lot of people, they don't have time and they don't really care about it. They just want it to sound as good as possible. Mm-hmm. So I definitely do tell them also about Audacity. It's also the first one on my list because it's free and they can just use it. And also for recording, so not even just for editing, but also recording. Mm-hmm. So they can use that for both. And then I do tell them to use Auphonic as well, because that starts free for, I think, about 2 hours a month or something. You can use that one. And then after that, you have to pay if you use it for more than that. But, the first 2 hours are free. So I'm just like, just use that one so you already have the right volume, and it already does a little bit of editing for you so that you don't have to look into that.
Oh, nice.
And that usually does work. Yeah.
Okay, so you take your clients, you either, do a do-for-you service, or you teach them how to become self-sufficient. Well, they've
Yes.
done their production. Those are the tools for production.
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
platforms or tools do you recommend for your clients for the actual hosting of the podcast?
I usually recommend them Fireside,
Mm-hmm.
which is one that is not, that commonly known yet within the podcasting world. It's kind of new,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very nice to use because it's very easy to use,
Yes.
and everything just it just looks very easy as well. That it's not overcomplicated. It's just very simple to use, and they just have one subscription that has everything. So you don't have the whole thing of, oh, if you use the small subscription, then you get this, but then you don't get all of the statistics. And if you want those, and you have to go higher, there's none of that. There's just one subscription. That's what you get, and you get everything that you need. So that's why I kind of tell them to use that one, because it just has what you need. That's basically it.
Sounds like you have somebody else there who wants to get in on the audio of this.
Yeah, the door was opening, so the dogs were like, "Oh my God, there's someone at the door." That's how it works. Yeah.
So if they go with Fireside, it's called, right?
Yeah.
Is there any advantage or disadvantage? Because, like some of the big names that you hear, like get it on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. Is there any disadvantage to hosting it on Fireside?
I guess maybe the price could put people off, because it's $19 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not the cheapest one. I know that a lot of my customers, if they don't want to invest too much in it yet, they basically always go with, okay, but is there a cheaper option?
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, there's always cheaper options.
Yeah.
So, you also have, for example, Libsyn, and you have Podbean, all the normal ones that have been around for years, and they also have cheaper versions. I guess I'm just more a fan of Fireside, because it's also just, I guess because it's so new, they really do have everything that you need. While sometimes Libsyn is a little bit behind in customer service, and some things are just a little bit more complicated, and Podbean is a little too basic, I think. So I just sometimes feel like, okay, if you really want to have everything that you need, and in a good way, then just go for Fireside and just invest that money and do that.
Just lack of complexity, but lots of functionality.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so you've got them to the point where either you're doing it for them, they're doing it. I've got this podcast. I know it's hosted on Fireside. How, as a business owner, do I then use that? Where do I use it? How do I use it? To my best.
Well, basically, yeah. Well, for Fireside, I mean, of course, you have to upload all the audio on there.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that once you have created an account, that you make sure that your podcast is going to be on iTunes and Spotify. Those are like the main two platforms that your podcast has to be on. The others, there are plenty of others, but
beginner question. I might be one of your clients. So now I've just gone, ooh, that's what I don't know about podcasting. So you put it on like Podbean or Fireside or wherever, and then it also has to be on the other larger, well-known channels.
Yes, but you do that through the host. Okay. So you have to have the host first. Yeah. Then you put some audio on it, because without audio, it's not going to work. So you have audio, you have the description, and you have the image that goes with it. So the artwork, they have to be there. Once you have that, then you have to actually go and apply it to iTunes and to Spotify. For Spotify, you don't have to do much. Sometimes, with most hosts, you just have to click a button and they do it for you. That's it. There's nothing to it. Then like 2 days later or something, it's already there. That's fine. But for iTunes, you do actually have to have like an Apple ID, for example, and you have to log into a certain website. But for that, you still need like the link for your host. So it does have to be there. Then iTunes actually has to approve it, or, they turn it down. If they turn it down, then you did something wrong, because there are some rules that you have to adhere to. And, if they approve it, then you will get an email from them. Once it's approved, then it's online. And then after that, you can just upload your audio, and it automatically goes to iTunes, Spotify, and all those places. So after that, you don't have to do it again, but you have to do it once. You have to apply it.
No, that's interesting. When you say like they might not accept it because you've done something wrong, what are some of the things that you could be doing wrong that would cause them to reject it?
Something you could do wrong is if you tell them that the podcast is clean, so there's no cursing in it, there's no swearing in it, and then there's some kind of a swear word in your title or your description or anything like that, they will turn it down immediately. They will just reject it. It could also be that your image is not up to their standards, because they do have certain standards. You know, it has to be certain measurements that they have to have, and it also sometimes even the size of it. I know with Spotify, that's a big thing for some reason, but it has to be under, I think, 500 kilobytes. If it's above that, they will just say, no, we're not going to do it. So there's just some of those rules. And of course, you know, there has to be audio. If there's nothing there, if you just have the title and image, but no audio, it's not going to work anyway. You have to have something already online on Fireside before iTunes can accept it or reject it. And for Spotify, the same thing. So you have to put something online before you can apply it.
I'm now sitting here thinking, why would you try to put something on with no sound?
I mean, you know, the thing is that that a lot of people, they have this launch date in mind, you know, so they say, okay, you know what, on the 1st of September, I want to launch my podcast.
Right.
So then you want to make sure, of course, that you put everything on iTunes already.
Yeah.
But the thing is that iTunes actually can take some time with the approval. And that can take from 24 hours to 7 working days, and sometimes even longer than that.
Wow.
And yes, and you cannot really hold that into account, because you don't know when they're actually going to approve it, so, or reject it. So you have to keep that in mind once you launch your podcast. And then the issue of having to put something online can be an issue, because you're like, no, but I want to launch on that date, so I want to put the audio live on that date.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, so you have to put something online. I usually tell people, just create sort of a trailer. Yeah. You know, like for 1 minute that you can put on your social media, which, you know, you just tell people, okay, on that date, I'm going to launch my podcast, be ready for it, whatever, you know.
Yeah, coming soon.
Doesn't matter what. Exactly. And you put that online, then iTunes can accept it, whatever, everything's done. Once they approve it, then you can go live on the day that you want to go live.
Darling, I am sitting here listening to you. I'm formulating your course in my head of how you're going to create the course and what you're going to teach people. Yeah, let's stop. Yeah. But, okay, so the complexity of this, I mean, considering it's audio, and as we had been discussing before we got on here, audio is so much easier when it comes to the time required for production. But there's got to be a whole lot of planning and timeline. Is that something you do with your clients? Do you kind of map them out from the beginning, going, okay, if this is when you want to go live, then we've got to have all these milestones we have to hit first?
Yeah, definitely. Because, you know, that's why I give them the entire plan, so that they can also see, you know, all the things that they need to have, because all the content, all the components that they need for their podcast. And I put everything in order. You know, they don't completely have to follow it if they don't want to, because sometimes, you know, you already have an intro, or you already have music from somewhere else, but whatever. Everything is in there, what you actually need, in which order, so that, you know, you have this complete podcast before it goes online. Because I don't want people to suddenly, you know, create this account on Fireside, for example, start paying for it, and 2 months later they're going to launch, because then you're paying 2 months for nothing. That just sucks. So you definitely do want to get them ready for it. And I also want to make sure that people, you know, that they do keep the launching date in mind, because if you have a launch date and you're like, well, I want to do that in 2 months, you know, then there's plenty of time. But if you say, oh, well, you know, I don't really have anything yet, but I want to launch in 2 weeks, not going to happen. Because I know my clients, you know, it doesn't happen, because people need to, you know, something get a push in actually recording something. You have an intro, outro, and yes, you can record them once, but they have to be good. You know, they have to work. And they don't have to be perfect, because you can always redo them, but they do have to sound right. And, you know, I help get them through that as well. So you always plan some extra time in for that, because, you know, there has to be some time to get that right. And if they do want me to find music for them, that also takes time. Because, you know, I mean,
how much time it takes.
Exactly. Because, and not even because it just takes time to find the right music, but also because once you send it back, and then they're like, oh, well, I don't really like any of them, well, you can start again. So, you know, if that would happen like a week before the launch, you're never going to finish in time. That's not going to happen.
So do you create almost like a project management Gantt chart, a timeline chart of like, here's our go live date, so this is what you're going to have to do, so that, you know, it keeps them kind of accountable and cognizant of the fact that, there's steps you have to take if you want to launch on that day?
Exactly. Well, I don't really use like the Gantt charts, but I do always keep them on track, you know? So right now I'm also developing more of a Trello board with them as well, so just so they can also check things off, because I've noticed that, you know, once they have that plan, sometimes, you know, things still don't happen, because they also can't really see it anymore. They don't really see what they still have to do. So,
Right.
I always have check-in moments with them,
Yeah.
but there's just times where it doesn't really work. So that's why I'm creating this Trello board as well, so they can just really check everything off and
Yeah.
we're right on schedule.
And
So
in Trello, you
for
can
any,
actually put a date on there, like due on this date, and they'll get an email to tell them, okay, this is due in 2 days. Yeah. Oh, that's a
yes,
really great way of doing it.
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I
So
mean, of course, in the
we've
beginning,
taken them through all these
yeah,
steps,
yes,
and there are many more steps than I originally imagined.
yeah,
Once they've got it produced and polished, and they've got all of the assets they require to get it to be accepted from one of Spotify or iTunes,
yeah.
they have it. They've got it. Where do they then embed the links, or what's the best way for them to actually push it out to their clients and or potential clients?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it. First of all, you always have to create a different section on your website for the podcast, always,
Why?
because if you don't, then people can't really find it anymore.
Okay.
And if you actually put it, in the menu bar so that people can actually see it, like, oh, podcast, okay, great. So once you click that, and what I always tell people is the best way to do it is to really create sort of a blog post for every single episode.
Okay.
Because if you do that, you have to write a text for the podcast anyway,
Yeah.
an entire description for it.
Yeah.
But you're also allowed to use links in it. So then why not actually make a blog post out of it, that also works in Google again.
Yeah.
It ranks you up.
Yep.
So that's always great. But it's also easier for people to find because you can embed an audio player that you get from your host in there as well. So then
okay.
once you have that, you can use that website link for your episode. You can use that on social media, for example, so that people are actually led to your website.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you put in the text, you can also put, okay, you can listen here, but you can also listen here on Spotify, here on iTunes.
Yeah.
People can click the link from your website, and then they can go to that platform. So
Yeah.
it's just a very simple way to do it, just so you have everything at once. So people can also come to your website and they know how many episodes you have. They can listen to all of them at once if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they can do it on iTunes and Spotify as well. That's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely fine. Once they have the link, they can subscribe and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is also, like, for example, on Instagram, you can put it in your link tree. You have all the links there.
Yep.
For Spotify, iTunes, all those places. But also you have to promote it always. You have to keep promoting it. You have to promote it.
Right.
So you have to, you can do it in advance. You can also do it when the episode is actually launched. And of course, you have to do it afterwards as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can do is you can put an audiogram on social media.
Oh, okay.
And an audiogram is basically just taking a small piece out of your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So just taking a small piece of audio that you think will, really trigger people to listen.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you really take that out, and with certain, audiogram tools, there are also some free ones. You can basically put an image behind it, and then you have, those audio waves.
Yes.
Playing along with the audio.
Yep.
And they have certain tools where you can just say, what, I want a story, for on Instagram, for example, an Instagram story. So they will already give you the right measurements. You can just move like the sound bar and everything. You can just move that however you want. Then you can just download it from that app and then put it on internet. Done. Then you already have another way of promoting it,
Yeah.
So you can
I'm
have
getting
like
so
15
excited
seconds or a
about
minute.
this.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun to do it that way, because you can use like an audio piece of like 15 seconds in your stories, and then have one for your feed for up to a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have extra promotion again. And if you keep doing that, that really works.
Get it out there. Now, I have one question that came to mind while you were talking about that in the podcast. And do you have any advice for people who are creating it and they're kind of strategizing about what their series are going to be, to keep them from, like, for example, I earlier this year really got onto Jim Quick. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's like Jim Quick, brain learning, and
Okay.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. But then after like maybe a dozen episodes of his podcast, it really started to get repetitious. And he had me totally hooked. I would still be listening to him to this day, except for I kind of started feeling like you got like one tune and you're just kind of like stretching that out. Do you help people kind of strategize how to avoid that? Because that was quite alienating for me. He's a really famous podcaster, but I kind of gave up on him because of that. The repetition and the one theme. How do you help your clients avoid that?
Well, I definitely talked to them in the beginning already about the content, kind of the direction that they want to go into. And I've noticed that for people who have very specific subjects,
Yep.
that can happen very easily, because then you're going to get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be honest, like my own podcast is kind of very specific because it's about podcasting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so you're going to share a lot of advice about it, and that's kind of, you know, where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
But I always make sure to tell people, like, look, you have a company, and I know that, and you have certain subjects that you want to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, don't make it too narrow. Don't make it too specific, because if you make it too specific, then you're going to run out of the things to talk about. It's better to have like a bigger subject that you actually think about, like, oh, that might be too broad,
Mm-hmm.
you know, too broad of a subject.
Yeah.
It's better to do that than have certain, you know, themes running through that subject, than to have one single thing that you have to focus on, because then every week you're going to be like, okay, what am I going to talk about now? You know, what can I think of in terms of that same
Yeah.
subject?
Yes. What have I talked about? What have I not talked about?
Exactly.
Yeah. Along those lines, I am a proponent of, when it comes to video creation, for somebody who's going to be creating a series, scripting. Just even if you don't stick to the script, and of course you don't want to sound robotic when you're creating your video, you've gathered your thoughts, you've created a structure to the flow of the narrative of what you're going to say. Do you recommend when people are creating their podcasts that they at least get some, you know, bullet points or scripting, or just go spontaneous?
It really does depend on the person themselves, but I would recommend bullet points. Don't use a script, because what I've noticed is that, you know, when you're doing a video and it's scripted, if you're really doing it the right way, no one will notice.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
But in a podcast, if you're doing a scripted podcast, they will hear it. Everyone can hear it, because you can hear them, you know, either reading from a piece of paper, or that somebody actually, you know, studied it. Actually notice it, because in a video, you know, you can distract people by using your hands, and in a podcast that does not work. You know, people listen to you, so you can hear every single thing. Now, I know, of course, there's, you know, you have all the audio dramas and stuff. They are scripted, but they're scripted for a reason.
Yeah.
And of course, there's sometimes when people someone has to read a piece of text out loud, you know, and then start talking about it. Absolutely fine, but don't read the whole thing, you know. Don't read a podcast out loud, you know. It doesn't work. Don't read from a piece of paper. It just, you hear it immediately. I've had so many people that once they've recorded their intro and they send it to me, that I actually have to send back, did you actually study this? Did you write this down on paper and then said it? How did you know? I'm like, because I can hear it. You hear it. You hear it very easily, because it doesn't sound natural anymore.
Yeah.
It does not sound natural. And I can't stand it when it's so scripted, because it's really, then you automatically sound like a robot.
Yeah.
Because you're just reading from a piece of paper instead of actually using your words, you know. Talk to someone, talk to a person. It's a radio show. It's not an audiobook.
It's not a recitation. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. And especially when you've got to edit it and you've got to listen to it numerous times, that makes it even more painful.
Exactly. And I really don't like listening to that. So I always tell people, you know, I'd rather have you record it 20 times and then I have to find the best one, instead of sending one that you think is absolutely perfect, but to me it sounds like, you know, you just read your grocery list from a piece of paper. You know, it doesn't, there's no personality in that.
Yes.
It does not work.
Now that leads me to another question, because much like creating video, you're never going to be good at it right out of the gate. It's going to take lots of practice, and you just get used to it, and you become more natural. But initially, it's not going to be what you want it to be.
No.
So,
definitely.
In your experience, how many times should they be kind of playing around with creating their audio? Like,
I think, well, I mean, I wouldn't really say there's a specific amount of time, because it really depends on the person.
Yeah.
Because it always depends on, you know, are they comfortable with it or not? So I do always tell them, that's also in the plan that I give them, is, you know, practice, record some stuff, and also listen back to it yourself.
Yeah.
Because some people also have to get used to hearing their own voice.
Yes.
Because it can be scary, a thing. But, you know, I always tell people, don't expect to be perfect. You know, it's fine if you have to re-record it, if it really doesn't sound right for you.
Yeah.
Just go for it. You know, just do it. We can cut stuff out. It's fine. You know, don't worry about that. Once you're comfortable enough with it and be like, okay, this is good enough. I want this live. That's it. You're done. You know, I'm not going to tell people, oh, you have to record it first 5 times and then we're going to know. It really, you have to feel comfortable with it. And if the quality and if the content is good enough, it's going to go live. That's it.
Yeah.
for example.
Well, Tyana, I've got to kind of move towards the end here, but so if people want to find out more about this,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, at least for me, over the course of this conversation, this is just like, I
Yeah.
was interested before, now I'm fascinated. So if people
Yeah.
want to find out more, how can they reach out to you, or what's the best way for them to get a taste of what it is you can help them with?
Well, I mean, they can go to my website. I do have to warn you, it is in Dutch right now. I don't have an English website yet, but they can go to www.blackbirdpodcasts.com.
Yep.
They can also come on my Facebook page, again, under Blackbird Podcast, or on my Instagram, where, you know, I share a lot of tips and tricks about podcasting, or they can even join my my Podcast Queens NL Facebook group, which is right now also again in Dutch, but you know, there's a translate button.
Exactly.
And they can always be, you know, send me a private message or DM or whatever if they want my help, and they, you know, they can't really find it in Dutch on my page. So I'm always happy to do it. You know, my English is, you know, I can talk to people
would
just fine.
not know that you were not North American. Your English is incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you know, I don't have a problem with that. So if someone else wants to work with me, but you know, they're afraid that I can't help them because it's a different language, don't worry about it.
No problem whatsoever.
It's
And I
absolutely
found
fine
going
for
to
me.
your website in the Chrome
Yeah.
browser, it automatically translates. So
Oh yeah. Well, there you go.
no
There you go.
barriers.
I mean, there probably will be one in the future, but for now it's going to be, you know, because I focus mainly on Dutch people, but I really want to help a lot more women, because I feel that a lot more women need to share their stories and really raise that voice, because a lot of people don't do it. But I think it's time for women to just stand up and actually say what they want to say and use a podcast to do it. So I'm there to help.
And if you can get them from like, oh, what's a podcast, to, hey, I've got a podcast.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
I absolutely love that. Exactly. So if anyone has that idea, but they're still too scared of whatever, just come talk to me and I'll talk you off the ledge, because then you really do have to do it.
Yeah.
It has to be done.
Well, Tyana, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm really sorry we couldn't actually get the Facebook Live streaming as it was, but I threw on record, and I'll just put this out in the group. And if you don't mind, I'm going to drop links to your business and also connections to the software that you've mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much. It was fun.
You're welcome. This was a pleasure. And again, thank you very much for working into the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll see you in the group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.